Greg Isenberg posted this tweet a few weeks ago, and I think it's one of the most accurate tweets out there on how a few megatrends, namely AI and communities, are just going to reshape startup land. If you don't know Greg, you're missing out. He's really a bit of a G when it comes to building communities and products, with successes at late checkout, 5buy, islands, and a load more. And in this video, we're just going to be breaking down each one of these points in the tweet with some really specific examples of how you can apply it to your startup and community. And if you like these kinds of videos, every week we do a teardown of one of the best in the best, like Greg, of how to build community-driven products. So if you want to see that, press subscribe and you'll be notified when we release these new videos. First lesson that Greg talks about here is MVP speed once per month. Now, Greg is a different kind of builder to maybe people that we've seen in the past. He's focused on delivering lots and lots of different products to his niche, validating those ideas and then iterating on them over time. He's not focused on exactly one specific thing. He's not just focused on his agency at late checkout. He's not just focused on his community with You Need a Robot. He's got this niche, which we'll come to later, and he's always testing and validating different ideas. And I think this is such a valuable concept. If you can get ideas out at the speed of once per month, validate whether people are willing to pay for them, then what you can do is pursue those ideas and iterate on them. But if you're not releasing stuff quick enough, you're not getting that feedback and you ultimately don't know what problem you're going to solve. So I think one big lesson that we can take from this is when you've identified the niche and the audience that you want to serve, what you want to be doing is writing down just 3 ways that you could solve their problems, when you're going to release them, i.e. in the next 3 months, and just deliver on that plan. Don't worry about, iterating on absolutely everything once you've delivered it. Don't worry about having this kind of waterfall chart and this, amazing product that you're going to deliver. Just get one thing out, validate something over 3 months, and you're going to be able to be in a far better position to know what you can explore further down the line. But how do you move so quickly? Well, Greg's helped us out here with the second point about AI accelerated. Unless you're living under a rock, you've probably noticed AI is quite a big deal now. At my company, we use it for hours every day. ChatGPT is definitely our most valuable employee. And what it allows you to do is just operate at a level of efficiency that startups of the past could only ever have dreamed of. So writers can write at 10 times the speed, coders can develop at 5x speed, and you can think twice as clearly if you have an AI assistant who is there challenging all of your ideas. So the take-home lesson here, if you are not absolutely hammering ChatGPT, if you're not leveraging AI as much as possible, you're going to be at a massive disadvantage to your competitors. So make sure that you get on that bandwagon. The next point that Greg makes is Superniche is the new niche. And I think what he means by this, we've all heard this, meme of, memeing down, finding your target audience. But as the world becomes busier and more connected, we're going to find more and more that the market is just already being served by far too many creators. And what we need to do is really, really niche down if we're going to find a spot in the market. And for me, I think the best way of thinking about a super niche is to actually look at Greg's example of You Need a Robot. He knew he was going to build something in AI. That was just something that was very important to him, that he thought was going to be a huge uptrend. He identified that as a great niche, but it's too big as a niche on its own. So what he then did was validated amongst that AI community the real problems they had and came across productivity. So then if you combine those two niches of AI and productivity, which on their own are probably too big to be served by a creator like Greg, and then you come into the AI productivity super niche, there is something really interesting, and there is where you can have an impact. This next point from Greg is something that I, as a product person, have found it really difficult to come to terms with over the last couple of years, but I completely agree it's true. Community first, software second. Thousands of apps get released every day. I've released apps before that nobody uses. Whereas if you have a community, you can basically sell them anything. If you have thousands of people who are on your newsletter, on your Twitter, you're going to be able to find a way to add value to them in a way that they're going to pay you for it. And I think that's why when we live, again, in this really busy, noisy world, building a community where you can serve them with a product secondarily is far more important. So yeah, if you're at the start of your entrepreneurial journey, or you're having a startup that isn't perhaps getting the traction that you want, focus on building that community, because from there, great things are going to happen. This next point of no code first, bit of code second, really just iterates on some of the points that come above about working quickly and getting MVPs out. You don't need to have a bespoke software platform to validate a hypothesis. Some of Greg's communities are literally just Slack channels with maybe a landing page built on Framer or other no-code tools. You do not need to go absolutely balls in with really complicated, expensive software. First, validate that hypothesis, understand it's something you want to follow with, no-code tools, and then start building out that value stack with some custom code. But do not think about custom code until you validated the opportunity. So global teams and localized products actually got me a bit stumped. So I'm always thinking about how to build a product that has global reach. So if you have any ideas about why it would be preferable to build a localized product with localized reach, really happy to hear that in the comments. When it comes to global teams though, I could not agree more. And Greg has actually built a product called Dispatch Design, which gives you access to global talent for designers. You're absolutely missing out if you're just looking in your city or country for engineers, content creators, writers, designers, whatever it might be, because the internet has made, access to education so much easier. And obviously Deal and platforms like that are making recruiting people so much easier, that you really need to be making sure that you're tapping into the biggest network that you possibly can. Our most recent hire was a developer that came from Nigeria, and he's absolutely great, and we would not have got that if we'd have only kind of considered looking into the UK. So make sure you're definitely considering, when you're recruiting for your team, talent on a global level. In this next point, Greg argues that in the future, 95% of companies are going to be dominated by small teams. I couldn't agree more. When you look at bigger teams, they just become more and more efficient. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a load of rules that says that, each time you add a member, the cost of communicating with that in a team goes to the square. So it really is very, very difficult to communicate effectively with a big team. When you've worked in a small team, you just realize how much more efficient and, just to be honest, how much funner everything is. If you can keep it between a group of half a dozen of you, you're all truly focused, you're all truly involved in the product. And I think the technologies like AI and others that are going to make us way, way more efficient further down the line mean that we're not going to need to have the manpower that we have now, because we're going to be so leveraged by these tools that smaller teams are going to be able to do great things. Greg is a perfect example of this. There's another guy called levels.io who's made some incredible products just as a solopreneur. So if you're thinking that you need to raise big VC money and get a big team together to launch your product or community, you absolutely don't. At the moment, you can do this with a much smaller team. I think one of the points that Greg is making throughout all of this is the kind of scarcity of attention, and that pop-up digital experiences that only open a certain amount of time are actually a great way to hack that attention. A good example of this is Be Real. Because people could only use it at a certain time every day, it triggered them into the behavior pattern of making sure that when they got that notification, they went on and snapped their photo. Other people that have done this are fashion brands. There's one called Cortez that I follow, and they only open their online store once a month, and it's always sold out because they're using these kind of pop-up digital experiences to really drive hype. So this is more of a tactic thing, but definitely something to bear in mind when you're building your community or startup. So let's unpack this next point about this kind of holy trinity that's needed to hit escape velocity, as Greg calls it. So you've got product market fit. This is just making sure that the product that you are creating has a fit for the market. Are you creating something that the market wants? If you're not, and people aren't wanting it, then you're basically building a pointless product. Everyone knows about this, but the more interesting examples I think are on the content market fit and community market fit. So content market fit means, are you creating the right content for your market? If your market is living on Twitter and you're creating long form videos, is that really the best use of your time? Should you just be creating, mediums on Twitter that are short, sharp tweets that are going to resonate with where your market lives? And the same with community market fit. Is the market that you're serving served by the community that you're building? Greg, a great example of this is the You Need a Robot community. He's built this community of productivity AI enthusiasts, which means that it fits with the market that he's trying to serve of productivity and AI enthusiasts. And if you've got all of these three people, then you'll be able to put content out that builds your community, and then you're going to have a community that's going to buy your product, which is all fitting into the market that you're trying to serve. So if you can get these three nailed, you're going to be in an incredible position. Okay, I think this next one we can just breeze through. We've covered it. Basically, AI plus software means that you are going to need a very small team. Multiple revenue streams is an interesting one. I don't think it makes sense for every business. I think for some businesses, just having a very clear, simple business model is great. But what Greg's talking about here is this kind of solopreneur, micropreneur community where you're probably casting your net a bit wider, building a lot more products. And this means that you're going to have multiple revenue streams because you can't release 4 different products solving 4 different problems and expect to monetize them in exactly the same way. A community might be, an ongoing subscription service, whereas if you have a marketplace or an agency, it might be a fixed cost or something monthly. So I think the point that Greg's just trying to make here is make sure that your pricing model matches with the problem and the product that you have. Don't feel bad about having multiple sources of income, and actually, if anything, can be a huge benefit because you're not going to have massive peaks and troughs. You're going to have different revenue sources and everything's going to be diversified. So I'm a bit of a stickler for design, and I definitely agree with Greg that the bar for design is just getting higher and higher and higher. You've got more people going into UX UI design. You've got tools like Figma, which unlock the capability for anyone to be a designer. And you've also got AI tools like Midjourney, which are helping people come up with designs. So your design needs to be absolutely bang on. And a great example of this is on late checkout, Greg's page. So let's just have a look through this. He calls this world design, and it's really a cutting edge design trend. But what it means, you've got these little worlds, some of them might be gated by, NFTs or different digital passes. And it really feels like an experience when you're working through this. And this can be a huge advantage for you. If you can be on the forefront of design and create design trends or latch onto design trends that are experiencing a bit of a moment, then people are going to remember what you're putting out there. They're going to feel far more involved, and they're immediately going to think this is a high quality product. So Greg's talked a lot about the power of community and creators and distribution. And here he's making the point that you want to network and partner with as many creators as you can. The best way of doing this, and this is how Greg has executed on this, is through his podcast, The Room Where It Happens. By having a podcast, you can always have guests coming on talking about it. You get to speak to people for an hour, which you wouldn't usually get to speak to, and then you have them as a connection. And this is just an incredible hack, I think, to be able to then use these creators as distribution channels further down the line. Because if you've got a network of great creators who are in your niche, it's going to be so much easier for you to sell your product. So when I read this next point, I thought of a line from Peter Thiel, and I might be butchering it, but it's something like, when you're starting a startup, think about why would the 50th person join your company? Because the first person that joins, they can take a lower salary. They might come from Google or one of the big companies, but they're going to be motivated by the equity. When you get really big, people will join because you'll be able to pay good salaries. But when you're in that middle point where you need to be recruiting people for not the best salary and not the best equity, how are you going to inspire them to join? You need to have a startup that's purpose-driven. Now, I think you can create incredible startups that aren't purpose-driven, don't get me wrong, but it does just make it so much easier if you've got a really strong selling point as to why people would work for you, why people would join your community, and why people should buy your product. Now, I'm going to group these last 3 points into what I call the fuck VC umbrella. And if you think about it, in the last 30 years or so, it's been pretty much impossible or very, very difficult to build a technology company without having VC backing. You can tell this because the ones that have been built without VC backing comes to mind, like Basecamp, maybe a couple of others. They are such standout like successes. People are like, oh my God, like how did you go and build this without VC? And the reason is simple, right? Like you needed to have lots of staff to be able to build these startups. You had high server costs. Because you had such an upfront amount of capital that you had to put down, it was really only possible to have VCs coming in and supporting you. And this also led to the effect when you were in this position where, because everyone else is raising VC money, you will feel like you have to raise VC money to compete because, if they've got 10 million in the bank and you've only got 100,000, how are you going to be able to compete with that? And I think what Greg is saying with all these 3 kind of tweets is that you don't need VC money now. We're living in a world where access to people is global, so you can source people for much cheaper than you might have done before. You don't need massive servers. You've got AWS, you've got AI to absolutely maximize your throughput. And if you build a community, you've already got a distribution channel, so you don't need to be plowing money into paid ads. So I think this is just like a really inspiring place to think from, in my point of view. And this is why I love Greg Isenberg as a content creator and builder so much. He shows us what is possible outside of the world of VC and huge valuations and startups that have only got the potential for moonshots, and just says that as creators, what we can build with a strong community, a focus on delivering a great product, and a very, very small team. So if you like this, we're going to be making videos tearing down other great creators and builders in the community space. So make sure to subscribe and you'll get notified of when we release these videos. Thanks a lot and enjoy the rest of your day.